Imagine three people. The first earns a monthly salary and does SIPs religiously every single month. The second has just received 10 to 15 lakh rupees, maybe from his ESOPs, maybe as bonus or inheritance, and has no clue when to invest. The third is convinced that there is a right time to enter the market and is still waiting for it. All three are asking the same question, whether they should do SIP or lump sum and which one is better. Now, internet has opinions, advisors may have preferences, but markets don't care about opinions. In this video, we'll settle this using actual proven historical data, math and probability, and not beliefs. And by the end of this video, you'll know exactly what you should do based on your situation and not someone else's. And we'll also be taking some practical real-life examples using numbers to understand how much time does SIP or lump sum take to reach a particular milestone like 1 CR. Chapter 1. Which one wins more often? Now let's start by clearing one thing up, that markets are not predictable, but they are not random either. Over short periods, definitely anything can happen, but over long periods, markets tend to move in one direction, which is upwards. Not smoothly, not linearly, but upwards over time. Now, this is not optimism that we are talking about here. This is what decades of market data across countries shows, and is very important in the context of SIP versus lump sum. Because investing is not a game of certainty, it is almost a game of probability. When investors ask whether SIP or lump sum is better, what they're really asking is which approach has a higher probability of giving better outcomes over time. Now, this exact question has been studied repeatedly by some of the largest and most credible investment institutions in the world. One of the most widely cited studies comes from Vanguard. Now, Vanguard is one of the major American investment management firms known for low-cost mutual funds and ETFs. It is one of the largest asset managers in the world, managing about $12 trillion in AUM. They analyzed decades of market data across multiple markets and compared two approaches: investing all money at once versus spreading the same amount over time through phased investing. The conclusion was very clear, and you might find it a bit shocking. In roughly 2/3 of historical scenarios, lump sum investing delivered higher returns than spreading the investment over time. In roughly 1/3 of the scenarios, phased investing or SIPs did better. So yes, 2/3 of the time lump sum wins and 1/3 of the time SIP wins. Now, this result was not just unique to Vanguard. Similar conclusions have been found in research published by Morningstar, JP Morgan, Charles Schwab, different time periods, different markets, but the pattern has been the same. So this is not a coincidence, and it is not about timing the market. The reason lump sum wins more often is actually very simple. The markets spend more time doing up than going down. When you invest a lump sum, more of your money is exposed to the market earlier. And when markets have a long-term upward bias, earlier exposure statistically works in your favor. This does not mean markets never fall, they do. And this is exactly why lump sum does not win all the time. That 1/3 of scenarios where SIP wins usually comes from situations where markets fall soon after you invest. If you invest a lump sum just before a major correction, SIP will look smarter in hindsight. Not because SIP is superior by design, but because the timing works against lump sum in that specific window. Now, that is an important nuance to notice. Now, lump sum does not dominate because it avoids risk. It dominates because it accepts risk earlier, and markets usually reward that risk over time. Think of it this way. If markets are rising over the next 10 or 20 years, the investors who put money to work earlier had more time compounding. The investor who delayed entry reduced exposure but also reduced the potential upside. This is why institutions always frame this debate in terms of probability and not guarantees. Lump sum investing does not promise better returns, it just offers better odds. And those odds are not marginal by data. A 2/3 probability advantage is meaningful over long horizons, but here is why many discussions go wrong. People hear this and conclude, so lump sum is always better. This is not what the data says, and that is not how this should be used. The data simply tells us this. If you already have the money, and if your horizon is long enough, and if you can emotionally handle short to medium term volatility, then statistically investing earlier gives you a higher chance of reaching your goals sooner, and simply just better CAGR over 2/3 of time. So this is not a recommendation, it is just a probability statement. And probabilities only make sense when you understand time, capital availability, and behavior together. Now that we have settled what the data says, let's move from theory to something far more concrete. Let's talk numbers. And let's answer the question, every investor actually cares about, which approach gets you to 1 crore faster and why. Chapter 2, the 1 crore man. Now let's move from research to reality, because at the end of the day, investors don't care about probability charts. They care about one thing: how long will it take for my money to become meaningful? So let's set up a simple and fair comparison. Same investors, same market returns, same goal, which is 1 CR. The only difference is how and when the money enters the market. To keep things simple, we'll assume a long-term return of 12% per year. No tax, no complexity. This is not to predict the future, but to understand the structure of compounding. A case one that we're taking here is 10 lakh rupees invested as lump sum. Now in this case, investor already has 10 lakhs available. They invest the entire amount on day one and let it compound. At 12% annual growth, the 10 lakh becomes 1 crore in roughly 20 years. Now what is most important here is not the exact number of years. It is the fact that every rupee starts compounding immediately. There is no delay. There is no staging. All the capital gets the full benefit of time. Now let us look at the second case. Case 2. Investing 10 lakhs through SIP. Here the investor does not start with 10 lakhs. Instead they invest through a monthly SIP of roughly 15,000, which comes to about 1.8 lakhs per year. At the same 12% return, now this SIP takes roughly 5 years to build a corpus of 10 lakhs. And this is where many people get confused. So let's be very clear. That 10 lakh already includes interest. Each SIP installment earns returns from the day it invested. Nothing is ignored, nothing is skipped. So why does SIP still take longer to reach 1 CR? The answer lies in when money enters the market. In the lump sum case, the full 10 lakhs got deployed on day one. In SIP's case, the money enters gradually. The SIP done in the first year takes long time to compound. The SIP done in the fifth year barely gets any time at all. On average, most of the SIP money enters the market around year 3, not at the start. Think of SIP money as people entering a cinema. You're doing a 5-year SIP. Some money enters very early, which is year 1. Some enters in the middle and some enters very late, which let's say is year 5. They don't walk in together. Now imagine you pause the clock and ask, if I pick one random rupee from this SIP corpus, when did it actually enter the market? The answer is somewhere near in the middle of the 5-year window. And that middle point is roughly year 2.5 to 3. Now this means a large portion of the capital simply does not get the same compounding runway. Once the SIP investor finally reaches a 10 lakh corpus at the end of year 5, compounding starts to look similar to a lump sum. But by then, something important had already happened. 5 years have passed. From that point onwards, that 10 lakh corpus still needs roughly 20 years to grow into a 1 crore at 12%. So the total journey looks like this. Lump sum route is about 20 years. SIP route is about 24 to 25 years. Now that's a difference of 4 to 5 years. Not because SIP fails to compound, not because SIP ignores the interest, but because most of the capital starts compounding later. That is the single and most important insight in this entire debate. Now, in the case of SIPs, yes, compounding does reward discipline, but compounding also rewards early capital and 2/3 of the times very favorably. SIP is a brilliant tool for discipline, consistency, and behavior, but mathematically, when the money is already available, delaying its entry into the market comes at a cost, and that cost shows up as time. And in long-term investing, time is not a small variable, it is the variable. So if lump sum has a clear mathematical advantage and SIP clearly takes longer, the obvious question becomes, why do SIPs even exist and what role do they play? And more importantly, when does SIP actually make most sense for Indian investors? That is what we'll answer next. Chapter 3. Why SIP exists and how Indian investors should actually decide. Now at this point, one thing should be clear. SIP did not come into existence to beat lump sum returns. It came into existence to solve a human problem and not a mathematical one. Most investors do not receive money in one shot. They earn it gradually. Monthly salaries, business cash flows, freelance income. And for this reality, SIP fits perfectly. SIP aligns investing with how much money actually comes into your life. It creates a habit, it enforces discipline, and most importantly, it removes the need to make repeated emotional decisions. You don't wake up every month asking, is this a good time to invest? You just simply invest. And that is SIP's real strength. It is taking out the stress of timing the market. Because in the real world, the biggest enemy of wealth creation is not volatility, it is indecisiveness. And that is also why SIP works so well during market corrections, not because it magically boosts returns, but because it keeps people invested when emotions would otherwise take over. Now, this is where many investors go wrong. They take a tool designed to avoid market timing and then try to reintroduce timing into it. That is where so-called enhanced SIPs come in. Now, the logic of enhanced IPs is whenever markets are falling, you invest a bit more. Now, increasing SIPs during market falls, pausing during the rallies, adjusting SIPs based on indicators, on paper, this sounds very intelligent. But in practice, it defeats the very purpose of SIP. Most of these strategies rely on limited backtesting, short time frames, a handful of market cycles, and that is not enough data to draw reliable conclusions. Worse, they put investors back into decision-making mode. Should I increase now? Should I wait? Or should I stop? That hesitation is exactly what SIP was designed to eliminate. Now let's bring this back to what actually matters. What should you do? The decision is not SIP versus lump sum. The decision is based on your situation. If your money comes in monthly, SIP is not just convenient, it is optimal. You invest as you earn. You don't wait, you don't guess. If you receive a large one-time amount and you do not need it for many years, lump sum or short-term phased investing makes more sense. The math supports earlier deployment. If you are conservative by nature and market falls keep you awake at night, phasing the investment over a few months is reasonable, not because it maximizes returns, because it keeps you invested. If you are aggressive, you understand volatility, and you have a long horizon, earlier exposure works in your favor. Or even if, let's say, you feel that you'll end up spending this money somewhere else, do lump sum for sure. What does not work in any scenario is waiting endlessly for the perfect time. Markets don't ring the bell at the bottom, and money that waits on the sidelines earns nothing. So here is the real framework Indian investors should use. Invest when you have money. Choose the method that keeps you consistent and optimize for time in the market, not cleverness. Because wealth is not created by choosing between SIP and lump sum. It is created by staying invested long enough for compounding to do its job. So here's the truth without the noise. Lump sum investing has a mathematical edge when money is already available. It gives your capital more time to compound and statistically gets you to long-term goals faster. SIP on the other hand has a behavioral edge. It fits perfectly with how most of us earn money and helps investors to stay consistent through market ups and downs. This was never about which method is superior. It's about choosing the method that matches your cash flow, your risk tolerance, and your ability to stay invested. And if you want more clear data-backed investing explanations like this, subscribe to Aspero.